I'm Jim Besnick. I'm here in Bird Point, Alaska, your fearless CIS history reporter, freezing my butt off trying to find the elusive Patrick Simpson. You can see he's not with us, but we'll keep looking for him. Folks, we heard a rumor that Pat Simpson might be up here at Portage Glacier, but as you can see, he's not here, just me and the glacier, which is hard to see because of the sun. Catch you later.
Can you see both of them?
There's another one coming this way over here.
Okay, go ahead.
We're not too far from Pat Simpson now, folks. In fact, this may be him right here. Come in here, would you, sir? Turn around and look at the camera. Are you Pat Simpson?
Nope, I'm Bart.
Okay, out of here. We'll see what happens, Mike. Get the yellow jacket out of here.
Yeah. Go away, Mike.
Well, as you can see, folks, we're here on top of the highest mountains close to Anchorage. We'll leave no stone unturned trying to find Pat Simpson. Out.
Go.
Yeah, Pat Simpson, we're looking for you high and low, tops of mountains, lakes, glaciers. I'll even put up the grizzly bears to find you. Okay, folks, we've been chasing around Anchorage all day looking for Pat Simpson. We've been to the tops of mountains, we've been to lakes, mud flats, we've been in the forest, we've wrestled with grizzly bears, and now, here he is, Pat Simpson in the flesh. We are in Anchorage, Alaska. We're yelling at the camera because there isn't a microphone. We hope you can hear us. So this is another interview in our CIS History Interview series, and Pat Simpson was one of our very first major forces in the shaping of the Neural Network Council, the Neural Network Society, and the CIS. So we'll get right into the interview now, Pat. So let me just start with a box can question. What did persuade you to study engineering or science?
Seasickness.
Did you hear that, folks?
I get very seasick. And my father's a fisherman, and I grew up on fishing boats. And I realized that if the only time I could fish was in good weather, I'd be a pretty poor fisherman. So I thought, well, I'm okay in math and science. Maybe I should think about engineering, which is a good way to go for a career path. And then it was just selecting the right school.
So is it fair to say, the second question on the list is there a person that influenced your decision? And I guess I've already heard the answer to that would be your dad, the fisherman.
That's right. That's right. That was
and no better person to influence you than your dad ever, anyway.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, Pat. The three core technologies of the CIS are neural networks, fuzzy systems, and evolutionary computation. When did you get involved in one of these technologies?
It was neural networks first, and I went to the University of California, San Diego, and graduated there in 1986. I think that was the same year that the PDP, Parallel Distributed Processing books came out by Rumelhart, McClelland, and Hinton. And UCSD, I guess if you will, was a hotspot for neural networks at the time, or what they called PDP technologies. And so as part of your coursework at UCSD, you took an AI or a similar course, you got some exposure to PDP, and I just got kind of interested in the idea that machines could learn. I thought that was a pretty cool thing.
All right, that's a great answer, and it's also very interesting and great that you happen to be in San Diego because, of course, that's where the actual embryonic stages of the entire society were. And in 1987, the first IJCNN was held in San Diego. Were you on hand for that, Pat?
I was. Now, it was actually not a JCNN, International Joint Conference on Neural Networks, I don't think until 1989. But in 1987, they had the first international conference on neural networks, and there really was two primary personalities that brought it forth, Robert Heck Nielsen and Bart Costco. And those two guys worked with the local IEEE section. I think they got one society, I can't remember which one, it's been a while, to sponsor it, and it was a rousing success. That year I was a volunteer. I was interested in the technology. First year out of college I was working, so I couldn't really afford the registration fees, so what I would do is volunteer to go to the conference, and then I got my way into all the talks I wanted to see with all the bigwigs in neural networks. That kind of got me excited about it, and then in '88 I became the tutorials chair, returned to San Diego, and then I think it moved out of the city after that.
And of course, in just a few years, Pat, unbeknownst to you, you would become a president of the Neural Network Council. We'll get to that in a second. Let me just ask you then, what do you think the impact of the CIS has been on you?
Well, it's been fairly dramatic, because early on, because of my involvement with and at that time it was the Neural Networks Council. So CIS wasn't even a terminology until 1994 with the first World Congress on Computational Intelligence, or I guess more appropriately 93 when Jim came up with that. He also came up with fuzzy, which I thought was great. Fuzz IEEE. So I think I forgot the question.
The question was, it's okay, Pat. You're a young guy and you have plenty of time to forget. I don't have so much time left to forget.
Well,
the question was, well, let's just skip that question
because it was so memorable.
What? The inverse question is, what impact do you think you've had on the CIS? When I say CIS, of course, ladies and gentlemen, in TV land, in video land, I really mean the Neural Network, first the Neural Network Committee, then the Neural Network Council, then the Neural Network Society, and finally the CIS.
And I think I've had an impact in a couple areas. Early on, I was part of the executive committee where the Neural Network Council was I guess expanding is the right way to put it. Bob Marks, who was the first president of the IEEE Neural Networks Council, then Russ Eberhardt, the second, and myself, I was the third. We spent a lot of time thinking about finding technology areas that seemed to match up with neural networks, but didn't necessarily have a home within the IEEE. So when we started looking at that, we expanded to things like virtual reality. There was a VRAE meeting, virtual reality, I don't know what the AIS stood for, but then we had CIPHER, which was a computational intelligence and financial engineering. We also looked at fuzzy systems and evolutionary computation because at that time I got very interested in the synergy between the two technologies of fuzzy systems and neural networks. Started looking at early papers like the fuzzy perceptron, which Jim Keller had written many years before that, and seeing that the very definition of a fuzzy set is a class. And so here you're talking about pattern recognition and all of these other things. So I started seeing synergisms. So in developing these ideas, we said, well, why don't we bring the fuzzy systems guys in? And I knew of you, Jim, from a previous conversation we had or something. So I said, well, I know one guy in fuzzy, Jim Bezdek. He used to be in Seattle, I think. So there was some kind of connection. I used to be in Alaska, so it was kind of like at least I could maybe get through the cold call. So I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to call Jim Bezdek, and I'm going to say, hey, Jim, the IEEE, this big monolithic thing, wants the fuzzy systems to a fuzzy meeting, and we want you to run it. And we actually thought at that time, quite frankly, that the fuzzy community would not want to have the IEEE involved because
we were a bunch of loonies.
No, more that the IEEE was kind of like the big heavy-handed, do it the IEEE way, and you guys were you guys were a bunch of loonies. So anyway, I was just re-quoting you. But what we found out was that the fuzzy community embraced the IEEE, and Jim then talked to Enrique Ruspini and Piero Bonassone and Jim Keller and others, and we were able to actually pull together some very well-attended and technically sound meetings, and we then said, okay, these guys not only want to run meetings, they want to be a part of this group, and we embraced that. So we pulled those key guys in as quick as we could to give them a place within the IEEE Neural Networks Council. Now, Neural Networks Council, if I can just for a second, because there's
How can I stop you?
I don't know.
Keep going.
There's in a council there's councils formed in IEEE by taking societies that want to be a member of the council and assigning two people to it. So what we had done was we had 13 different societies that wanted to sponsor, if you will, the Neural Networks Council. So some of those were like the Computer Society and Power Engineering, and some of them were Systems Man and Cybernetics. Anyway, so what we had to do was we had to kind of keep all these presidents from all these these societies happy, because what we were doing was we were raising money through the registrations and these conferences to have other conferences and then start periodicals and journals. So when Fuzzy came along, we had a Fuzzy conference, and it was very popular, well attended, and it made a lot of money. So we were able to kind of grow our organization by doing more and more conferences. Then I had an office right next to Dave Fogel when I worked at a company, Orincon in San Diego, now owned by Lockheed Martin. And I would go to Dave Fogel on a regular basis and say, Dave, we want the Evolutionary Computation group to come in. And so he actually developed ICEC, the first international conference on evolutionary computation. So I was kind of around and helped facilitate some of those early introductions to the IEEE from these two very important groups, the neural networks, the fuzzy systems, and then evolutionary computation. I guess that would be three groups.
That's a good summary of some of the things you did, Pat. You did many more things than that, but certainly those were some instrumental contributions. Could you pick out a single contribution that you think was the most important thing you did?
Well, actually,
you just said it in 10 minutes.
No, I think that it's going to sound
because
strange.
I have one in my mind. I want to see if it's the same as yours.
Mine was when I became president in 1994. I was all of 28 years old, and so you can imagine a 28-year-old that's running the Neural Networks Council with these 13 presidents that are looking at you are wondering, can you do the job? And it just turned out that at that point we had overrun our resources in conferences, and we were put on what's called financial watch, which means that you're being watched and we could be folded so that the Neural Networks Council could have gone away. So we were actually at a very critical point in which we had to come up with a financial strategy that demonstrated to the IEEE at large that the Neural Networks Council was a viable entity. So I went to this financial watch meeting and presented our case and told them how we were going to be good citizens and good stewards of everybody's money, because if we went broke, then all the councils had to pitch in to pay off our debt. So in doing that, I met a fellow from Iowa State. I wish I could remember his name, but I can't. And he says, what you really should be doing is reorganizing your financials, not around conference registration income, but transactions. And look at the all periodicals package and look at maybe getting some more transactions on board if you can, and growing your revenue stream from your publications and not from your conferences. And so I did that. And in doing that, I also kind of reorganized and restructured the IEEE Neural Networks Council, so we had a couple different vice presidents so that those guys could be trained to come up. So we had VPs of Treasury and a few other things. But those were organizational things. But I really think my biggest contribution was I reorganized the financial stream of money coming into the Neural Networks Council away from registration towards periodicals. And at that time, that saved us from going under, and we could continue to try to exist.
I'm glad you said it, Pat, because it's exactly the contribution I would have brought up if you didn't. Just for the record, for the CIS history record, that period of time in our beginnings was a very rough patch for us. It was a rough piece of sea, so to speak, for a fisherman.
Yep.
And Pat was the guy who steered the ship right through it and brought us out on the other side of the storm. And I was there for that whole storm, and it was truly frightening to see all the societies circling us like a bunch of sharks, thinking about carving up our treasury and busting us up. So.
Well, one story to be sure that I'd love to tell, because you were involved with this. But we had a meeting in Dallas, Texas, and basically what we were told was this is the meeting where all the presidents were going to show up, because the presidents themselves of these societies could show up as their own representative. Usually they would pick a couple people and send them. Well, we had, as I said, 13 different societies, and I think 8 or 9 of the presidents of those societies came to that meeting in Dallas with the intent, I believe, to remove the Neural Networks Council. I think they all were going to vote to get off. I don't know that for sure. This is my opinion. I hope I'm wrong, but it sure felt like it when we were going in. So we had to present ourselves first to the Finance Committee, which I had done a couple months sooner, and now to the actual presidents. And we're talking like the Computer Society with 300,000 members. This is a big deal. And I'm running the meeting. I'm, a whole 2 weeks. I think it was in January of 1994. I'm like 2 weeks into my presidency. And we went through the meeting and we followed strict parliamentary procedure. Thank goodness Charlie Robinson was there. And it kind of got to the end and we were kind of through the rough spot, so to speak. And we're still feeling tense. And Jim came up and you were the VP of Publications, I believe. Conferences. And you stood up in front of the group and you reminded us all we're humans by saying, I think you thought the Kansas City Chiefs was going to beat the Oakland Raiders and go to the Super Bowl.
And it was the year that Joe Montana was playing for Kansas City, being dumped by the 49ers. And I was outraged.
And it was the kind of levity at that time that was absolutely a tipping point in the whole entire organization, the meeting, because at that point everybody felt a little lighter on their feet. We ended the meeting, we went out, we had a few adult beverages afterwards, and we never looked back. Things weren't well, and that was a very important time. To me, that was I think a tipping point.
Well, those few years really were important years for us, and I think we've covered them pretty well. There are a few questions here about the future. I don't know if you'd care to comment. It's been, we're talking right now about things that happened 15 years ago, and now we have transactions in AI and games, and we have transactions on autonomous mental development. We've had lots of growth in areas that 15 years ago you wouldn't have envisioned. Yeah. Do you have any thoughts about the future, or the future, Pat? I guess you would agree that it's going to be much like the present, only longer.
Well put. Well, the only thing I can say, and I think I said this probably 15 or 20 years ago, is the information that we're collecting as a society and as a world was going to require better and better tools for us to sift through it and make sense of it. And pattern recognition and intelligent systems are going to be the tools in which are going to carry the day. So whether it's baskets of medical imagery or we're talking about Google searches, I think those things are going to become more and more prevalent. And the tools that are going to be developed are going to be computational intelligence tools.
Okay. Any final thoughts?
I don't have any. I appreciate the time. I would like to mention a few people that were very instrumental in the early days of this development. In the neural network side, Bob Marks and Russ Eberhard got mentioned. Jacek Zarada was also a pretty critical guy early on. And then in the fuzzy side, there was yourself, Enrique Ruspini, Piero Bonassone, and Jim Keller. I mean, those guys really carried the day for us early on. And then on the evolutionary computation side, there was Dave Fogel, who ultimately, I really wanted him to get the transactions going when I was president. He said it wasn't the right time. All right, so it's not the right time. So it was a little bit of a disappointment on my part, but it ultimately came to pass. And it's a great transactions. And then finally, Karen Haynes was there from the very start, and hopefully at some future time you'll get a chance to sit down with her and get her perspective of the early days of the Neural Networks Council.
We will certainly endeavor to do that. I believe she's moved back to the States, so we'll see whether that comes to pass. Okay, well, I guess that'll cover it then, Pat, unless you have something else you'd like to add.
I don't. I appreciate
so we're here in Anchorage and we're about to sign off. I think we'll probably travel to another country for our next interview. We spare no time or expense to bring you the best history possible and in this ongoing series. And so with that in mind, Pat, there's one more thing you should always say when you're being video recorded.
What's that?
Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good.
Thank you.